Welcome to our channel. Today, I have a very special announcement that will be revealed at some point in the video. Of course, I can't reveal it right now, but here's a little hint. We're going to add something interesting to our universe. Make sure you watch until the end so you don't miss it. In this video, I'm going to share 3 completely bizarre stories about mysterious disappearances. But before we get into the stories, if you're a fan of the weird, dark, and mysterious, you've come to the right place. This is exactly what we do, and we share these stories every week. Please show your support by hitting the like button, but don't tell anyone that you secretly put a small piece of glass in their ice cream cone. Just kidding. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos from us. Okay, now, let's start with today's mystery stories. On the afternoon of October 11, 2016, pale yellow sunlight filtered through the small windows of the visiting area of Sequia prison deep in Venezuela. Carlos Herrera, a tired-looking middle-aged man, walked slowly into the room. His eyes swept across the space in front, where the tables and chairs were arranged in a haphazard manner, reminiscent of an old high school cafeteria. However, instead of laughter and bustle, the atmosphere here was heavy, so quiet that you could hear your footsteps on the cold, tiled floor. Carlos looked around, trying to reassure himself that he was here for an important reason. It was not his first time in a place like this, but today, what he was about to hear would change his life forever. His eyes stopped at a table near the front, where a disheveled prisoner sat waiting. As he got closer, Carlos realized the man looked even worse than he had imagined. The prisoner's face was gaunt, his pale skin clinging almost to his cheekbones, making him look like a shadow of himself. Bruises covered his body, some still fresh, others already dark purple. One of his arms was bandaged, but blood had seeped through the white cloth. His eyes, tired but still alert, scanned the visiting area as if searching for something or someone. Guards stood scattered around the visiting area, their hands on their weapons. Their faces were tense. They did not hide their unease at the upcoming meeting, as if something dangerous or unpredictable might happen at any moment. A few glanced at Carlos as he passed, their gazes a mixture of sympathy and wariness. Carlos knew why they were so nervous. For the past month, the prison had been in an unprecedented state of chaos. A brutal gang led by Dorancel Vargas, a notorious criminal throughout Venezuela, had risen up, overpowered the guards, and taken control of the prison. During that time, dozens of inmates had died, and many more had been brutally tortured. Only a few days ago did security forces regain control, but the damage had been devastating. Carlos wasn't here to see his son, Juan Jr., who was serving a 5-year sentence for robbery. He was here for a more heartbreaking reason. During the riot, Juan Jr. had mysteriously disappeared. Carlos had knocked on every door he could find, from prison officials to local politicians to prominent journalists, but no one could give him a clear answer. Finally, after much effort, Carlos found a prisoner willing to tell him what he knew. And today, Carlos was here to hear the truth, no matter how painful it was. As Carlos sat down in the chair opposite him, he realized the prisoner was looking at him with a mixture of wariness and exhaustion. The air between them froze for a few seconds. Carlos tried to keep his voice calm, but he could not hide the pleading. "Tell me, what happened to my son? Where is he?" The prisoner looked at Carlos silently for a moment, as if considering how to answer. Finally, he sighed, leaned back, and began to speak. But instead of answering Carlos's question directly, he told him about another man, Dorancel Vargas. Vargas was a name that was feared throughout Venezuela. He was notorious for his brutal murders, often of innocent victims, killed for his own gratification. He was known as a cold-blooded, remorseless man, and the leader of a gang that had been terrorizing the prison for the past month. "Do you know who Vargas is?" the prisoner asked, his voice hoarse. Carlos nodded, his eyes darkening. "I have heard. But what does that have to do with my son?" The prisoner continued. He explained that during the riot, Vargas had not only brutally tortured and murdered prisoners, but had also built his own system of control. Under his rule, the prison had become a lawless world. Prisoners had to bow their heads if they wanted to survive, while those who resisted had to pay with their lives. "But you know," the prisoner said, his voice dropping, "Vargas didn't just kill people. He did worse." Carlos felt his heart sink. He wasn't sure he was ready to hear the rest, but he knew he had no choice. He had to know the truth. This is truly horrifying and tragic in the context of the Venezuelan prison riot. Juan Sr., an elderly father listening to the story of a prisoner, who seems to be a key witness, who experienced the unimaginable during that chaos. This prisoner recounts every step, every event, revealing a bloody and brutal picture of the Vargas regime during the riot. Vargas, a man who is both dictatorial and terrible, but at the same time ensures that the prisoners have basic needs, such as food and essential resources. This makes things even more complicated. On the one hand, he is a strict ruler, suppressing any opposition with brutal violence, while on the other hand, he maintains the minimum supplies to keep the prison from completely collapsing. But that very control causes many people to suffer endless pain. The old prisoner pointed to the bandages on his hands and the wounds on his body as clear evidence of what had happened. He explained that if anyone dared to stand in Vargas's way or oppose him during the riot, they would be beaten almost to death. Many prisoners died just because they dared to oppose him, making the regime a real nightmare. When Juan Sr. heard this, he was shocked and asked if his son was beaten or suffered like the other prisoners. But the prisoner shook his head, not admitting it. Instead, he avoided his gaze and said something that hurt Juan Sr. more than anything. "What happened to your son was much worse." The prisoner said that during the riot, Vargas had chosen Juan Jr., Juan Sr.'s son, to do a special mission. Whether his son agreed voluntarily or was forced to do so is unclear, but it is known that under Vargas's rule, no one had the right to refuse. Failure to comply would result in torture or even death. Juan Jr. agreed to help Vargas distribute food to the prisoners, because despite his brutality, Vargas still had to ensure their basic needs. But because the prison was locked down during the riot, the food supply was very limited, causing many prisoners to starve. Juan Jr. was tasked with finding a way to provide food for the other prisoners. Instead of going out to find food, Juan Jr. was faced with a horrifying situation. Vargas and his gang cornered him, beat him to death, then dismembered him and even used his body as food for other prisoners. This story was like the worst nightmare, causing Juan Sr. to completely collapse. The pain of losing his son made him decide to speak out publicly, holding a press conference to tell the world the horrifying truth about what happened to Juan Jr. Despite many witnesses recounting this tragic story, the Venezuelan government has steadfastly denied the cannibalism and related crimes. Vargas remains in power, has never been arrested or prosecuted for any crime related to Juan Jr.'s disappearance and death. The story is not only a testament to the brutality of a dictatorship in a chaotic situation, but also a call for justice and truth. It makes us reflect on the price of power, the desire to survive in the harshest conditions, and the pain of loved ones when their loss is not recognized or compensated. Juan Sr., with a broken heart, still persistently fights to make his son's story known, so that no one else has to suffer the same tragedy, no matter how much the truth is denied. The sun had long since set, giving way to darkness that enveloped the remote Brazilian countryside. The small hut of Raimundo Marfa Dilva's family seemed even smaller and more fragile in the endless wilderness. In the quiet darkness, only the dancing flames of the fireplace reflected on the rough wooden walls, creating strange silhouettes, as if they were telling some mysterious story. Raimundo, a 12-year-old boy, sat with his knees drawn up near the fireplace. His eyes watched the flames flare up and then die down. It wasn't because he loved the fire, but because he had nothing else to do. In this hut, where everything was minimalist, his joy was confined to quiet moments like this. By the warm firelight, far away from the harshness of life outside, his two younger siblings were sleeping soundly on a simple wooden bed, their steady breathing mixed with the crackling sound from the fireplace, creating an unusually gentle melody in the dead silence of the night. His father, Mr. Revelino, walked out of the kitchen, the only room connected to the main room by an old wooden door. He said nothing, just sat down quietly next to his son. The two sat side by side, each immersed in their own thoughts. Revelino occasionally held a stick, gently poking the fire to keep it from dying out. Raimundo, though not saying anything, could still feel the fatigue on his father's face. The hardships of life had carved deep wrinkles on his forehead, making him look much older than his actual age. Suddenly, the silence was broken. A strange sound, soft but clear, echoed from the kitchen behind the door. Raimundo raised his head sharply, his eyes turning towards the source of the sound. His heart stopped as he saw a shadow gliding past. The figure was unlike anything he had ever seen. It crawled on all fours, quickly and silently, then disappeared into the deep darkness. "Father," Raimundo blurted out, his voice trembling. Revelino was already on his feet, his eyes glued to the kitchen, his face showing shock and fear. He did not answer his son, but rushed to the kitchen door, slammed it shut, and locked it. The noise woke the two children in bed, who sat up, eyes wide, faces bewildered. "What's wrong?" one of them asked, her voice dreamy but worried. Revelino turned around, trying to reassure his children in the calmest voice he could muster. "It's okay. Everything's fine. We're safe. The door's locked." But the words did nothing to dispel Raimundo's unease. The strange black figure still lingered in his mind. What was it? Was it a wild animal? Some creature from the darkness? Or was it just a figment of his imagination? Outside the hut, the wind blew through the deserted fields like a whisper of a secret that did not want to be discovered. The chirping of insects also seemed to have died down, giving way to a haunting silence. In the small room, 4 people sat close together, their eyes following every little sound. Each minute that passed seemed like a lifetime. Tonight, they were not only facing poverty and loneliness, but also an invisible fear, hidden deep in the darkness that enveloped the hut in the middle of the Brazilian countryside. Inside the dark room of the hut, Revelino and his sons sat together, their hearts pounding in their chests. No one dared to speak. The silence hung like a heavy curtain. Outside, the wind whistled through the cracks in the door, creating a haunting sound. But everyone tried to remain calm. Revelino, with a calm face but a worried look in his eyes, reminded his sons to stay still. The kitchen, which had been filled with strange noises before, was now silent. Time seemed to drag on for what seemed like an eternity. Then from afar, voices began to ring out. These sounds did not come from the kitchen, but from outside the hut. Revelino and his sons strained their ears, trying to understand the content of those strange voices. At first they were vague, unclear, but gradually everyone began to hear a name being mentioned. Revelino's own name. Revelino, come out. If you don't, we'll kill you. This chilling remark sent shockwaves through his sons. One of them whispered, his voice trembling, "Father, what should we do?" Revelino sat up straight, his eyes determined. "It's okay. It's just a cruel joke someone played on us," he assured him. "We won't do anything. The door is locked. We're safe here. Wait until the sun rises, and everything will be clear." All night none of them slept. They sat close together, listening to every sound outside. When dawn broke, the first light shone through the crack in the door. Revelino stood up. "Stay here," he instructed his sons. "I'll go out and check." Although there was no more voice, the tension remained. Revelino unlocked the door to the kitchen. He entered, looked around the room, but saw nothing unusual. Everything was as it had been before. He picked up a large knife from the kitchen table, turned to look at his sons through the crack in the door. "I'm just holding it for protection," he said. "You stay here. I'll go out and check to see if anyone's there." The door to the hut creaked as Revelino opened it. Cold air rushed in, carrying the musty scent of the jungle. He stepped out, closing the door behind him. Inside, his sons listened tensely. They heard their father's footsteps moving around the kitchen, but nothing unusual happened. After a few minutes, the door opened again, and Revelino walked in, still holding the knife. "It's okay," he said, his voice calm. "I'll go out and look around the hut again." This time he walked straight out into the open air. The footsteps faded away. His sons sat still, so tense they could hear their hearts pounding. A moment later, they heard a loud noise in the distance, like the crash of something heavy. Then all was quiet. The boys looked at each other, worry rising in their eyes. But before they could decide what to do, footsteps sounded again, heavy, slow, coming toward the hut. The door swung open, and Revelino emerged, his face smeared with mud, but his eyes shining. "There's no one out there," he said, his voice firm. "It could be the wind or our imaginations." Still, that night had left a deep mark on their minds. Though they found no evidence of anyone else's presence, they knew that something, or someone, had really happened. In the early days they still had hope, believing that their father might have gotten lost or had an accident. But as time went on, the silence gradually became oppressive, choking the faith in everyone's hearts. Until a miracle or a mysterious fate appeared, everything was revealed in a cold and inexplicable way. A group of hunters accidentally discovered Revelino's skeleton, deep in the large crevice they had once peered into. The body was dry, covered with dust and moss, as if it had been there for a long time, unknown to anyone. But how did the father get stuck there? How could he have entered such a deep crevice without anyone noticing? And could the appearance of the mysterious yellow smoke and rotating objects be the cause of this tragedy? The villagers began to spread more mysterious stories. They said that on the night before Revelino disappeared, strange voices echoed throughout the house, whispering menacingly, like warnings from some force that humans could not see. Some said they had seen a shadow flash across the kitchen floor in the middle of the night. A vague, indistinct figure, but enough to make them shiver. These stories spread throughout the village, creating an atmosphere of panic and horror. No one dared to enter the area of Gaitha Crevice, After hearing about the strange yellow smoke and mysterious floating objects, people whispered that it could be a sign of a supernatural force or a door opening to another world, a place where humans could not resist. Time passed. Many years had passed since Revelino's disappearance, but the question was never answered. People could not explain. What exactly was that deep crack in the rock? Is it a normal cave or a passage to another dimension? Where did the thick yellow smoke and the spinning cylindrical objects come from? Were they natural phenomena or a sign of something supernatural? And finally, what caused a man like Revelino to disappear completely, leaving only his cold corpse deep in a crevice that no one discovered for 6 months? The mysterious story of the Raimundo family and the mysterious crevice is still told, like a big unanswered question, a reminder of the mystery, the strangeness of nature and the supernatural forces that still exist somewhere beyond human control. On quiet nights, if you listen closely, you might hear the wind whistling through the rocks, hear mysterious whispers, and sense the presence of something both mystical and terrifying, like the story of Revelino, the man who crossed the boundary between this world and another. Today, the two brothers, now grown men with many life experiences, no longer meet each other by searching. They choose to return to the old house, the place where after their father, mother, and stepfather left, the two brothers stayed, relied on themselves, grew up on their own. The house is not only a warm home, but also a witness to their childhood, a place that holds every painful memory, every tear and laughter of childhood. Entering the old house, Luis and his brother saw pictures hanging on the wall, images of a once happy family, warm moments now only remaining in memory. Each wall, each corner of the house seemed to tell the story of their lives, about the injuries and the resilience to overcome adversity. Memories flooded back, mixed with deep pain and joy when the two brothers were back together. They began to clean up. Old stories were told through laughter, silent tears. Although time had somewhat healed the wounds, the scars in their hearts were still there, smoldering like an unquenchable fire. Finally, they realized that the house could not remain in such a dilapidated state. It had suffered much damage and deterioration over the years of loneliness. They decided to renovate the house, not only for material reasons, but also to heal the damaged memories, to renew their lives, to write a new chapter. Luis looked around the room, his eyes filled with determination. The cracks on the walls, the worn wooden panels, all would be replaced, given a new look, just like the lives of the two brothers. No matter what the future held, no matter what unknown things awaited them, Luis and his brother knew that they would move forward together. Together, they rebuilt from those old bricks of memories, creating not just a house, but a symbol of love, resilience, and strength to overcome everything life gave them. In Luis's heart, that house will always be a place to return to, the most solid support for him and his beloved brother. And there, no matter how much loss, they still have each other, still have family, in a unique, profound, and irreplaceable way. That afternoon, the last rays of the day filtered through the old windows of the house, creating streaks of light on the faded brick floor. Luis and his brother Manuel sat in the small living room, diligently cleaning and sorting through the family's old belongings. The dusty smell of the memorabilia and the old wood mixed together, creating an atmosphere that was both warm and heavy, as if it contained many untold stories. The house had been quietly waiting for change for many years, and now, the sounds echoing from the master bedroom made the atmosphere more lively. A group of construction workers were working urgently inside. The sounds of sledgehammers hitting the walls resounded loudly. Mixed with the sound of drilling and quick footsteps, the house seemed to be reborn, gradually changing its clothes to welcome a new chapter in the brothers' lives. Suddenly, a loud noise suddenly rang out, strong and sharp, interrupting the previous steady rhythm of work. Everyone fell silent. A mason, his face red from exertion, shouted, "Guys, come in here and see." His voice was both nervous and panicked, making it impossible for Luis and Manuel to keep calm. They stood up and rushed into the master bedroom, where the noise had come from. Both of their eyes were glued to the object that had just been pulled out of the smashed wall. At first, they only saw a white, shapeless object lying motionless on the dusty floor. A shiver crept through them, dark premonitions rising in their hearts that they did not dare to face. The mason, with trembling hands, slowly explained, "This is a human skull." Time seemed to stop in that moment. Luis and Manuel looked at each other, their hearts squeezed by the horrifying truth. Little did they know that their beloved mother, whom they thought had left for unknown reasons, was actually imprisoned and hidden in the house they called home. Continuing to break down the wall, they found an entire skeleton, bound and gagged, lying in a narrow cavity inside the wall. Pain spread through the brothers' hearts, because this was not just a skeleton, it was their mother, who had suffered unimaginable cruelty in this familiar home. The deep scratches on the inside of the wall were like a silent testimony, a sign that their mother had tried to resist and cry for help. That silent, desperate cry had never reached anyone. They choked up, tears rolling down their cheeks, as they realized that their mother had gone through miserable days. Her last attempt to be rescued, but no one heard. Luis immediately contacted the Mexico City police. When the authorities arrived, they conducted a thorough investigation of the house, examining every corner and every brick. Questions and hypotheses were raised, but everything remained obscure, lacking enough clues to unravel the mystery. The police suspected that the stepfather, the mysterious man who had disappeared a few days after their mother's disappearance, might have been directly involved in her death. He was the only person with the motive and opportunity to commit the crime, and at the same time conceal this horrifying truth. However, despite years of searching, the stepfather was still missing without a trace. It was rumored that he might have fled or died long ago, because if he were still alive, he would be 90 or older by now. Luis and Manuel stood in front of the house, their eyes filled with grief and shock. The bricks and walls, which seemed inanimate, now carried the darkest stories of the family. For the first time, they saw not only memories, but also the most brutal and cruel truth. The pain that had been piling up for nearly 20 years was finally released, albeit belatedly, but it was the first step for them to begin healing. In the gentle sunset that colored the entire city of Mexico, the two brothers stood side by side, shoulder to shoulder, as if to pass on strength to each other. In their hearts, there was an unshakable resilience and determination. The journey to healing their wounds might be long, but at least now, the secrets were exposed. Together they would move forward, rebuilding their lives, not only for themselves, but also for their sacred bond that was stronger than ever. A new beginning, born from the very remnants of a painful past. Wednesday, July 9, 1910, London. A 16-year-old boy hurried down 4 flights of stairs in a cold concrete building in the heart of London. Each step he took echoed softly on the mossy steps, the sound echoing in the quiet space mixed with the distant noises of the city. The dim afternoon light filtered through the tall, dusty windows, tinting the empty space inside a light yellow. As the door opened, a cold wind blew in from the street outside, carrying with it the smell of coal smoke and the dampness of the Thames. The boy stepped out onto Burro High, a bustling street on the south bank of the river, where voices, footsteps, wheels, and engines mingled into a chaotic but lively symphony. The street was packed with people, each busy with his own work and worries. The sound of horse hooves echoed on the cobblestones, mixed with the sound of cartwheels and the soft horns of newly appeared cars, symbols of a booming industrial age. These sounds seemed to want to swallow everything, especially a young boy like him standing in the middle of the storm. He pulled his hood lower, trying to hide his eyes and immature face. He knew that he could not be discovered, could not be recognized. Every gesture, every action had to be quick, careful. His eyes darted back and forth, alert to every step, every glance that passed by. His heart was pounding. It felt like the beating echoed in his ears, making everything around him suddenly larger and more threatening. He walked through the crowd, hiding like a ghost among the hurried passers-by. Every time he lightly touched a passer-by, his heart tightened. Strangely, in this crowded sea of day people, no one paid attention to him. The city seemed to have swallowed him up, hiding him under a shell of noise and chaos. As time passed, he gradually felt less tense. He took a deep breath, slowed his steps, and tried to blend into the crowd. His hat was still low, but his eyes were no longer furtive, but full of determination and hope. The goal ahead was the nearby subway station, where he would meet his beloved father again. Just a few minutes later, he saw the familiar figure of his father from afar, a middle-aged man, his face haggard, his eyes shining with worry but full of warmth. He held a small suitcase in his hand, walking hurriedly but still maintaining the necessary composure. The boy smiled slightly and walked quickly towards his father. "Today, I came at the right time," he said softly, his voice still echoing with a slight tremor of excitement. "We have to hurry, son," his father replied, his eyes looking around warily. "The train is almost here." The two of them rushed down the rusty iron stairs leading underground, where the dim light from the cheering oil lamps created alternating periods of light and dark. The sound of footsteps echoed in the narrow space, mixed with the sound of the approaching subway engine. The subway doors opened with the hissing sound of escaping steam. Passengers crowded into the train. The boy and his father squeezed onto the train. As soon as the train doors closed, the sound echoed like the sigh of the entire imprisoned city. Inside the train, the air was humid and stuffy, but it was also the only place where they felt temporarily peaceful, away from the prying eyes of the outside world. Both of them bowed their heads, avoiding eye contact with other passengers, like people hiding from the harsh reality of life. The train began to move, rushing through the underground tracks deep underground. The flickering lights of the small windows in the carriage illuminated the boy's pale face. Each sound of the wheels rolling on the rails was like a new beat of life that he had never known. His father placed his hand on his son's shoulder, his eyes full of love and hope. "Son, this is the first step of a new journey. We will overcome all the difficulties ahead together." The boy nodded, a belief that was both fragile and strong. They were running away from London, from everything that had imprisoned and threatened them. But at the same time, they were entering a completely new world, with challenges they had never encountered before. That escape, whether short or long, would be marked in his memory forever, as the beginning of hope, of freedom, and of dreams that never died. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch today's video. I'd love to hear what you think of this episode, so leave your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget, we have hundreds of other great videos waiting for you to discover right now. And if you want a recommendation from me on which videos are worth watching, this is a great choice for you. So keep watching. All is well. See you in the next video.